Well, hey there, Mama, and welcome back to the Moms Overcoming Overwhelm podcast, episode 164. I'm Emily McDermott, and I'm here beside you on this journey as we work together to declutter your home, head, and heart. So, one of the first podcasts that I started listening to on my minimalist journey was the Minimalist Moms podcast. And I am super thrilled to have the host of the Minimalist Moms podcast, Diane Boden, on the show today. And we are diving into her journey with minimalism, how she has been impacted by different thought processes, and also by nature, by her faith, by different faiths, and also how, as a homeschooling mom, that has impacted her parenting and her relationship with her husband and her friends and her children. It's just a wonderful conversation about her journey. And if you don't know Diane, besides being the voice of the top-rated podcast, the Minimalist Moms podcast, where she spreads her ideas and interviews with others in regards to living a life in the pursuit of less, her goal is simply think more and do with less. I love that. She's been featured on other popular podcasts such as The Spillover with Alex Clark, The Mom Hour, Find the Magic with Intention, and many others. She's also been featured in Simplify magazine in March 2023. Her book released in March 2021, and I will make sure to link to that in the show notes. And she lives in Columbus, Ohio with her husband and her 3 children. I know that you are going to love this conversation, so what do you say? Grab the notebook and pen, and let's dive into today's conversation with Diane Boden. Hey there, Mama. Are you tired of all the stuff crowding your home, calendar, and mind? Do you wish you could say goodbye to the endless to-do list running around in your head? Want to declutter but don't know where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to Moms Overcoming Overwhelm, where you will find proven and practical solutions to declutter your home, head, and heart. Hi, I'm Emily, a wife, boy mom, and simplicity seeker. I struggled to get pregnant and felt overwhelmed until I discovered decluttering could create the physical and emotional space I needed to become a mom. Now, 2 kids later, I've transformed my life and motherhood by developing simple systems around decluttering, capsule wardrobes, kid stuff, cleaning and tidying, meal planning, time management, and more, and I can't wait to share them with you. If you're ready to reclaim the time and energy you crave, be present with your kids, and finally enjoy the life and motherhood you so deserve, let's kick overwhelm to the curb, shall we? Grab your lukewarm coffee, your notebook and pen, and clear off some counter space. Let's do this. Well, hey, Diane, thank you so much for coming on the Moms Overcoming Overwhelm podcast. I am really excited to talk to you today.
I know, I'm so excited to talk to you too. You've been on my show a couple of times, so it's about time to come over here and then have you back over on my show too in the new year. So
Yay. Yes,
happy to talk.
I've been sort of stalking you. I've been like,
Oh,
Diane, I want you on my show. I felt like I was being kind of annoying, but I know that you have been such a blessing in my journey and my life as far as like inspiring me to do the podcast in the first place and just kind of being like this inspiration in my minimalism journey. So I'm just so happy because unless people have been living under a rock, I'm sure they have been listening to your podcast. And I would love it if you could introduce you and your family, kind of how you serve women, and also like what you like to do for fun, if you have time for that.
yeah. So my name is Diane Boden, and I'm host of the Minimalist Moms podcast, as you mentioned. And I've been doing this. I actually just looked it up the other day because someone was asking me, but I have been doing this for 8 years. I've been doing it on my own for 6
Yeah.
years. So it's been a really exciting journey that I didn't necessarily ever expect. I just had a common interest with a friend, and she was living in like 3,500 square feet at the time, and I was living in less than 1,000, but we were both pursuing a minimalist lifestyle. So we figured this could be a really dynamic conversation going on here if we start this podcast. So that's kind of the origin story of how it began. She ended up stepping away 2 years after we started it, and I made it more of an interview-based podcast. So that was a bit of the origin story of how I started Minimalist Moms, but I've been pursuing more of a minimalist, I say intentional lifestyle for about 10, 12 years now. And again, I think it started with minimalism. And now because I've decluttered all of the things, it seems more of how do I live intentionally and stay on top of all of this? Because it doesn't seem as heavy now getting everything out. That process seems to be over. So that's a little bit about minimalism in myself. But what do I like to do? I feel like friends are a huge foundation in my life. So I try to see my friends at least once a week as a mom. I think that we underestimate how rejuvenating that time can be for ourselves. And I also, my husband does the same thing. So I think that healthy balance is really important. But yeah, I love to hang out with my friends, whether that's just like getting together for cocktails or if we go on a hike or get coffee. And then what else do I like to do? I have my photography side hustle that I do in the fall mostly. I like to play guitar. I'm trying to think what else. Just like to be in nature.
Yeah. And watch Love is Blind. And are you caught up?
Oh my gosh, this season has been truly a little bit unbearable to watch.
Hmm.
I'm really excited because I think it'll be next fall that they're gonna have Columbus.
Oh, really? And they're
So
in
yeah,
DC now, which is my neck of the woods. So that's pretty funny.
yeah. I don't know. What do you think about this season?
Yeah, one of those things you like think everything is like okay. I feel like the guys have been dropping the ball quite a bit, and I'm just very impressed with a lot of the women that are
Yeah,
dealing with some of the shenanigans. But yeah, I
I
think I
haven't
was
gotten
think
there,
oh,
but
okay, I won't.
I know what you're talking about. I have heard.
Yeah, there's some shenanigans, but all in all, I find it to be like an interesting thing. So it's kind of my one sort of guilty pleasure show, and I love connecting with you about Love is Blind and what's going on and everything. So
Yeah, my favorite is Taylor and Garrett. Those are I love them
yeah,
and I think she's stunning. So I'm
yes,
interested in them and pretty much no one else this
yeah,
season.
that's
So
kind of how I
hopefully
am too.
next season.
Yeah, we're rooting for Columbus. Well, I know you were kind of alluding to this a little bit as far as like your minimalism journey, but something I don't really know about you is sort of where you have felt overwhelmed in your motherhood, being a
Hmm.
homeschooling mom of three kids. I'm sure there have been one or two times when you have felt overwhelmed. And can you bring us back to a point when it could have been you were kind of overwhelmed by stuff, or maybe it was like routines that weren't working, or was there anything that comes to mind when you're just kind of like raising that white flag, you're like, I can't do this anymore, and then you were able to make a shift? Could you talk to us about that?
Yes, I would say a couple of years ago, it is just balancing everything, which I'm most moms are doing that. We're juggling a
Mhm.
lot more than we probably can handle, but we just remind ourselves this is for a short season, so I'm going to endure and move through it. And I think sometimes that works well. For me, I got to a point where I truly was experiencing so much burnout that I was getting dizzy
Oh,
and
wow.
I was getting these dizzy spells and I finally went to a physician because I usually don't go to the main doctor because I'm relatively healthy. But I went and he was like, you are carrying so much stress in your neck and upper back. And he said, you have to slow down. I was telling him about minimalism as I was like just meeting him. And he was like, yeah, you're not taking your own advice.
Mhm.
And he was like, you really need to try and carve out time to rest, relax, do nothing like you say that you believe in. So I started going to a sauna. I bought a sauna membership and would do that multiple times a week. I think I probably should have invested in my own home sauna. It probably would have been more cost effective, honestly. But I saw the contrast of, hey, this actually does work. What you're saying on your podcast and what you're
Mhm.
saying on social media, you haven't taken your own advice and it's gotten you to this point where you're starting to have health effects
Yeah.
and that rest and we're truly doing nothing. Like you can't take your cell phone into the spot like the sauna with you. Sometimes I would take a book, but more often than not I would just be alone with my thoughts and be quiet for a half hour. So it was that point that was a turning point for me to say, yes, I want to do a lot of things. Yes, I do enjoy living at a more not busy. I do enjoy filling my schedule, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I maybe can't take on as much as I think and do a good job in all of those areas. So I feel like I'm better now, 2 years, flash forward 2 years, of saying no to things that I don't want to say that don't matter, but it's like, where am I investing? I want to invest the most time and energy towards things that seem to move the needle, whether that's relationships, or events. You just can't say yes to everything. You need to
Mhm.
carve out time for margin. And so I think I'm a little bit better now about carving out time for margin and rest at home, whether that's watching Love is Blind or I'm trying to get back into reading fluffy, not or fluffy fiction, as I like to call it. really like thrillers, but I just feel like I was getting to that point where I wasn't even doing that. And then you
Yeah.
start getting frustrated with people and it's not their fault.
Hmm.
It's not the person's fault that asked you to do something that you overcommitted yourself to. And so I think it's hard when you like to exist at that level though,
Yeah.
and reminding yourself you're only human, you only have so much bandwidth.
Yeah, I can really relate to that, especially like the overcommitment part, because
Mhm.
I tend to overcommit and then I get stressed and then I sort of like take it out on everyone.
Yeah.
And I think it might be getting older too. I just turned 44 and had this makeup class yesterday because I never
Oh, I
learned how
saw
to put
that.
on makeup.
Yeah.
This is not a representation on the video, by the way, of like what it would look like. But I think for me, it was kind of like, okay, well, if I'm not going to take the time to do things that actually are important and matter to me and matter in the grand scheme of life, like no one's going to do it for me. Like I'm
Mhm.
in my mid 40s, which is like crazy to come out of my mouth and like think about that. But
Mhm.
I'm like, I just can't be doing it just because I think I should or it's expected, or I have to say yes because I am a previous chronic people pleaser. And the intentionality has been like super important to me. I was sick recently and I was like, I'm unapologetically going to go to bed at 8 p.m. Like, I don't even care because I'm not having to produce and to, be on top of things all the time. And it's exhausting. So I like the taking our own advice to heart with
Yeah.
that. But I think that, when you were talking about it being 10 to 12 years in on your
Mhm.
minimalist journey, I'm nearing my 10-year
Mhm.
anniversary. And just to think about kind of where it started and kind of where it is now. And I was reviewing your book, which I'm going to link in the show notes, and you have kind of these areas of focus. And
Mhm.
normally we start our any kind of discussion of minimalism, it's really easy to start with like the stuff because that's
Mhm.
kind of like this what we can see, what we can touch, what's kind of overwhelming us. And that's where I started. I think that's kind of where you started too. But
Mhm.
as you progress in your journey, it becomes more of this like intentionality, more
Mhm.
of the mindfulness, more of the like understanding how to live within your capacity in a given season. And I'm just curious, like from where you started to kind of where things have shifted over these 10 to 12 years, how you've been influenced kind of by different ways of thinking, like your love for nature, or
Mhm.
we talked about like previous to the interview, like Stoicism or like
Mhm.
Christianity. And I just would love to find out like what your journey has been like.
Yeah. And I did remember what I was going to say
Yeah,
to you here
please.
a second ago. I was just talking about the need, if you are more extroverted, to fill a role. So you say yes because it feels good to be depended on.
Mhm.
And I also think that when you're saying yes to all these opportunities out of either people pleasing or I just want to fill that role, you're taking it away from someone that might need a little bit more boost to step up into that role. And so again, I think it's about really having discernment on what the best role is for you. And if it is uncomfortable to say no for certain things that you know are not for you, you don't know, in my opinion, how God might use someone else to fill
Yeah,
that role
totally.
and or someone else's just again boost that they need to be in that position. So that was my thought for that.
Hmm.
But in regards to the evolution of my thought process, not just with Christianity, but like you said, Stoicism and living intentionally. I think for me, I grew up in the church, and I think for anyone, you have to make faith your own. Like it's not just your parents' religion, regardless of what that is. And so I've had these moments once in my early 20s where it was like, what do I actually believe? Because I say God is ruler of my life, but I'm not really acting like
Hmm.
that. And I do think that we're always going to be imperfect and straddling the line of sin sometimes. But I really had to like make that declaration in my life. Flash forward to my early 30s, and I feel like because of politics, I was starting to allow my mind to be more ruled by politics and
Mm.
political debate and discussion rather than God. And I think God is a loving God. And I think that again, regardless of what I don't know if your listeners are I don't know if your listeners are Christian or what they're not religious or whatnot, but I think a lot of people can agree that we should be coming from a more loving standpoint and approach. because it's all about relationship. And if you don't have a relationship with someone, then you're never going to be able to communicate whatever it is to that person. It's going to be in one ear and out the other,
Mhm.
especially if it's harsh condemnation. So I'm aligning, I promise I have a point here,
Of course.
between my Christianity, the politics, intentional living, like all this stuff was coming to a culmination again of just this identity crisis of saying, why do you believe the things that you say you believe? Are you just kind of going along and chameleoning to whatever it is that is popular at the time? Like, are you actually even living this minimalist lifestyle? Are you living the Christian lifestyle? And then I guess it was like coming back to my why.
Yeah.
So I will just say, like, I am first and foremost a Christian. I believe in Jesus as my Lord and Savior,
Mm.
but I also have found it very interesting to read text on Buddhism and
Mhm.
Stoicism. And that doesn't threaten my belief because I feel, one, I do believe that everything that's good in this world is inspired by our God. Sorry, that's just how I feel about it.
Mhm.
But I'm like, there is so much goodness to be pulled from here. And so, yes, I feel like because I've gotten rid of all of the things, like tangible things in my life, I have this ability to do more of the self work and reflection and try and be a better human. Because ultimately, I think the things in our life weigh us down so we can't grow. And we
Yeah.
don't even have time to notice areas that we feel weak or insufficient. And because we don't realize the burden of what like our schedules or our possessions have on us. So
Yeah.
yes, I've been more interested in things that are outside of Christianity, but I think some people in my family have been scared for me to do that because they're like, don't fall away from your faith. But to me, if that threatens my faith, I was never a Christian to begin with. I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense to you. So,
No, it does. It's
and I
really
don't even know if that
fascinating.
answered your
It
question. So,
did. It does.
okay.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And to answer your question, I mean, for the podcast, I speak about my faith. I don't actually know the demographics, but
Yeah.
as far as like listeners are concerned, but I think for me and similarly, I have been able to grow in my faith through because I came to minimalism when we were going through infertility, which is
Yeah.
when I was clinging to my faith more than ever before. But
Mhm.
I'm in kind of maybe a unique situation is that my husband is an atheist and I'm Christian, and we're raising kids and trying to have some of these values and understand like what values are important and everything.
Yeah.
And also, minimalism has allowed me to more like surrender. I guess I always say you can't surrender to a greater purpose, whatever you think that is, if you're clutching to your stuff. So
Mhm.
having that like posture of surrender, because I feel like the concept of living out your purpose is something that isn't like specific to a particular religious belief, but in my mind, like it's whatever God's purpose is for my life. And I
Mhm.
want to be able to approach that open-handed and unencumbered. And that's where I've been able to sort of see him as provider rather than I have to be pursuing stuff and like getting more. And I talk about having like a manna mindset that the
Mhm.
Israelites in the desert, they're like, what's this manna? And then they
Mhm.
were just collecting as much as they could. And then
Mhm.
it bred worms and stank, which for me is like, we were never meant to have the excess. We were always supposed to see God as provider. And so
Mhm.
that has been really like where I try to come at it too. But the thing that I appreciate, I mean, I appreciate a lot about you, but your desire to be in nature. You are
Mhm.
in nature a lot more than I am. And with your kids and as part of like the homeschooling experience. And how has your love of nature kind of helped to connect you to sort of this greater story when it comes to like the intentionality that you're trying to live
Yeah.
out?
So I do feel like my husband and I, when we got married, we did enjoy going out on walks together. We enjoyed being in nature together. But I will say COVID seemed to be a turning point where we really started getting into more family walks. And that was a turning point for me where I wanted to start homeschooling my daughter. And one of the things that really influenced that is I saw a friend of mine, she was in this nature group, and I would just see it the whole in 2019, I would see her out there, and my heart just yearned to be out there too. But I was like, oh, I don't know if I can homeschool. I don't know if that's realistic. And then COVID happened. And then I was like, oh yes, I'm fully capable. My degree's in English education. So I was like, I'm fully capable at least of doing this in the elementary school years. So my husband and I agreed that we'll homeschool our daughter. I was able to get myself into that nature group. And so I would say that that is, yes, I've always loved nature, but it's being in nature with other people and just allowing kids the freedom to exist. And
Yeah.
it comes back to, they don't need a bunch of toys to have fun. And oftentimes I think that it hinders their creativity. And so for me, just watching these kids figure out something to do in nature it's just been lovely. And then you get to exist with your friends, like hanging out, but you're outside. And I love, what is it? It's Linda McGurk, her book,
Mm.
No Such Thing as Bad Weather. That was also a really important book, I guess, in my journey of my love of nature, because I do think that's true. We are just so, as Americans, especially, used to these comforts of air conditioning and heat. And get me wrong, like the heat's on here right now, but it's okay to be uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
so I enjoy going out even when it's raining. Like we've hiked outside when it's downpouring and you have an umbrella and you have a rain suit. And again, that's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think it's important to weave in like little bits of uncomfortability in our
Hmm.
day. And I would rather be uncomfortable out in nature because it's just glorious. Going back to the Christian element of all of this, it's glorious to see God's creation and actually how nature comes alive in the rain. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. But yeah, I think in regards to minimalism and things, I mean, kids, I think this is a huge point that I've been starting to realize. I think we are so overwhelmed with the things when kids just used to have to go outside and be imaginative. And I do think it's like similar to cell phones and
Mm.
social media. We had this opportunity to have the iPhone and Instagram, and we didn't realize what it's like. What's the Spider-Man quote? With great
Oh,
responsibility.
great power comes great responsibility,
Yeah, it's
I
the same
think.
thing with that. But I do think now that we have the ability to buy whatever we want from Amazon, we never were supposed to have this many things or
Yeah.
the ability to uh, buy this many things, or the ability to go down the street and there's whatever food at our fingertips. And so I think we're, as a collective society, we don't really know how to deal with all these things. So we become hoarders, or we're like, I can't
Mhm.
let go of that. But this is seems like a first world problem because it's like we never had that in the past. This is like
Mhm.
a recent thing that we have too much. It used to be not enough. So sorry, I know that kind of veered from your question about
No,
nature, but it gets me into this larger conversation of like, oh, no wonder we're just a mess right now. We were never meant to have this much.
I think about that too. And especially, I want to talk about kind of like your kids and how some of these values you've been able to take from your journey and to be
Mhm.
able to like instill in them. And of course, with nature and talking about like it's okay to be uncomfortable, like it's
Mhm.
okay to go play in the rain. And I think that there is sort of this issue with avoiding discomfort and parents wanting to shield their children to avoid discomfort at all costs.
Mhm.
But I think even about like the kids watching TV, and it's like they can, even my kids now into a voice remote thing, they're like, play whatever show, and it just instantly pops up. And it's just, there's no searching, there's no friction, there's no, oh, I can't watch this right now because it's not the time that it's on, which is like what it
Yeah.
was when we were, younger. But I'm curious, sort of, some of the values that I feel like have helped then teaching my kids have been, generosity and gratitude, contentment, stewardship, as far as like we're taking care of what we own and we're stewards of God's
Mhm.
resources. And I'm just curious how, I guess, how's your journey and your husband's journey alongside you impacted like the values that you've been imparting and that legacy, I guess, that you're
Mhm.
leaving to
Mhm.
your kids?
Yeah, I think that's hard. I do think there will probably be more pushback as they become teenagers. I'm hoping that we've laid a foundation so that they keep a little bit of that, but they will, again, it kind of goes back to the spirituality thing. Like you get to make these things that you've that you've learned from childhood into your own. And I hope they take these things away. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think what you said, generosity, usually before the holidays, before birthdays, we go through and we just say, is there anything you're not using that we can donate? Obviously, like in good enough condition to be
Mhm.
donatable. But yeah, just the appreciation of boredom as well. I think that that is a lost art. Carlos Whitaker wrote about this in his recent book. I think it's called Reconnected, but that's an excellent, oh my gosh, I'm almost
Mm,
done with it right now. And it's been an excellent book, but he talks about just being bored and how we are afraid to be bored. Even when we go into public places, we don't want to be bored. We don't want to feel uncomfortable and awkward. So we pick up our phone and we have our phone
yeah.
in front of our face and we don't make eye contact, or you do, and it's like an awkward smile. And then you go back into the comfortability of, well, I'm disconnected here, but I'm connected here. So I feel good about
Mm,
that. So I think with my kids, I want them to have those moments of, it's okay that you don't have your screen right now. And we have 2 screen days a week, Tuesday and Saturday, but during the school year, it's Saturday only. That
nice.
is with the iPads, the tablets. They are allowed to watch an hour or like a movie on a
Yeah.
weekday. I don't care about that. But specifically with the devices, that's 1 day a week. And it's like, we took that cold turkey when school started, it was over. And they were uncomfortable for a few days, but that's okay. They found other things to do outside and they found ways to play outside. So I do just think it's a muscle that has to be stretched and
Hmm.
like honed so
Yeah.
that they can apply that to other areas of their life. So I wouldn't say that I make a big effort in like, hey, this is why I'm living this way and doing this. But I do think, I guess I do have those conversations. Like I try to talk to my kids even when they're really little. I don't talk to them like they're little kids. I explain everything and allow them to be as curious as I am and just explain the reason behind why I do those things. So I guess I am, but there's
Yeah.
nothing that's, I would say, overarching that I'm trying to instill. I want them to be critical thinkers to get to that
Hmm.
point on their own.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot, as we're trying to launch these kids eventually into the world. I think a lot about that, like you said, like critical thinking skills and curiosity. And I'm not homeschooling, but even just thinking about, okay, what are some things that maybe aren't being focused on at school as much that I
Mm-hmm.
can help cultivate? And they
Mm-hmm.
know kind of what I do with the podcast and like,
Mm-hmm.
helping moms declutter and stuff, but I have talked to them a little bit about the why, so like,
Yeah.
why do we want to have space in our schedule? Why do we
Mm-hmm.
want to have space in our room? Why is it that we're not going to be on our tablets right now and we're going to go take a walk? And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like kids can handle it. Like even at young ages, they can like understand the greater importance of things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really been a focus in my parenting as well.
That's funny. I feel like I used to be incredibly authoritarian in my mindset. And now I find myself, I don't know if you're familiar with Gretchen Rubin's, the Four Tendencies, but
Yeah.
I'm a questioner. And once I found that out about myself, because my husband gets annoyed sometimes, he's like, why do you just ask so many questions? And it's not to go against what he's saying or to question, like necessarily question. I just need to have answers. I think I feel more in control when I have those answers. So now with my kids, as opposed to saying like, you just have to do what I said because I said
Mhm.
so, I think there may be times for that when uh, Benji's like running across the street and you have to just be like, no,
Yeah.
because I said so. And then you can take that time later. But oftentimes I'm like, no, I have the time to explain the why now.
Hmm.
Because again, that's helping you build that just box of tools in your mind to say, this is why I'm doing the things moving forward. Um, so I guess that's how I'm intentional as well.
Yeah.
That
No, I love that.
yeah.
And I'm curious, just kind of like as we wrap up, if there was any kind of other aspect of minimalism, of like the influences that you have had that have really been kind of speaking to you at this particular season of your
Mhm.
motherhood.
Well, like I said, that book by Carlos Whitaker, which I want to make sure
Hmm.
I get the right name. I don't know if you're familiar. It's called Reconnected, and it's a recent
Okay.
book. He went and spent 2 weeks in a with monks, and then he spent 2 weeks in Ohio with the Amish. But he's just talking about again the disconnect that we have created as a society, and that not that phones are bad. He's on his phone. He's not. It's not a book to get rid of the phone, but it's just about how we reconnect with each other. So I feel like that's influencing me in my mothering and in my life right now. Again, I want to put them in quotes, like some of these woo-woo books, and I just take what is good from it
Yeah.
and try and apply it. So there's a book called Awareness that I read, Anthony
Hmm.
DeMello,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he is just a funny a funny man, and I just love some of the lessons. I think that there's so much to be taken from old myths and like folk tales. Like,
Hmm.
what's the lesson here, and what's the story here? Because that's how we've communicated, like through history, is through the
Yes.
stories that people share and pass down through the generations. And so, just taking those little bits and pieces here and there, I do feel like influences me. To be honest with you, I would wish that I could say my church is a huge influence on me, but we just recently moved. I'd say recent, it was a year ago.
Hmm.
And I feel like that has been a struggle for me personally to feel disconnected from a church community. We have a church that we go to here that's lovely, but it doesn't feel like
Yeah.
what I'm used to.
Hmm.
So I kind of sometimes, when I've been questioning just how I've been feeling the last few months, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like, I've kind of uprooted myself from this 1 day a week connection that I used to have, which was more than 1 day a week, but
Yeah.
no wonder you feel a little bit chaotic right now. And
Hmm.
you moved from 40 minutes from your city that you grew up in. So like, it makes sense that you're trying to just get your, like, find your footing again.
Hmm.
But yeah, so Carlos, that Anthony DeMello book has been really helpful. I think, honestly, tuning out from a lot of the voices on Instagram, like the mute button is very
Yes.
powerful. Not to say like I don't love you and I don't love what you're doing. It's just I can only take in so much. So I'm going to curate that to uh, what I can handle right now. And sometimes it's fun. It's like toy rotation. Like, you can go in and say like, okay, I've heard enough from you. I'm going to unmute you now and move you in. So I don't know. I don't know if that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I will link to some of those books, including your book,
Oh,
in the show
thanks.
notes, of course. And yes, I agree that just being very, talk about intentionality, being intentional about what voices you're allowing in and what is actually talking about influencing and influencers, like what is influencing my motherhood, what's influencing my parenting. And I did kind of a curation, like you said, of Instagram the other day because I was like, I'm never on here. And then when I am, I want it to be people who I know that I actually care about and am invested, in
Yeah.
their lives. So I am totally with you on that. Well, Diane, thank you so much. This is such a great conversation. I appreciate that you are up for kind of going in some different directions here today. And
Yeah.
can you just let everyone know the best place to connect with you?
Yes. So at Minimalist Moms Podcast, or if you want to follow me personally, it's at Diane_Boden. Just post more of my real life on there, which I'm trying to get better about on Minimalist Moms. I'm like, maybe people are interested in this. But my book is Minimalist Moms Living and Parenting with Simplicity. Trying to do more blogging at my website at minimalistmomspodcast.com and Substack. I'm just trying to figure out where
Yeah.
my place is here other than the podcast. But I think the podcast is the main outlet for my creativity and interest. So that's Minimalist Moms
Yeah.
Podcast everywhere you listen.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I will link to all of that. And thank you so much. I'm so glad that we were able to do this. And I really appreciate all of your time and for coming onto the show.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful. I know because we didn't focus on some of the main topics, I was trying to gather all my thoughts here and crafting the best answer for you. So I hope it was helpful
Yeah.
to your listeners, and thanks for having
Yes. It was great. Thank you. If you like today's podcast, here's what you can do. Just take 30 seconds to leave me a review. I know you're a busy mama. You're overwhelmed, in fact. But 30 seconds of your day makes such an impact. I'll be blessed by your words. They'll definitely make my day. And who knows, you might be entered for this month's giveaway. In Apple Podcasts, scroll down to write a review. Thanks so much for your time. I'm so grateful for you.